Hello and welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Levi with Mailbox Money. When people think about economic growth, they usually think about housing or business development. They don't always think about airports, even though they play a huge role in whether a community grows or stalls. Today's guest, is Kent Penney. Kent works in aviation planning and helps airports, especially in smaller and mid-sized communities, think long-term about infrastructure, operations, and how they support regional economics. Kent, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, Levi. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir, Kent. I always like to start with some of your personal background, letting our listeners get to know who you are and where you come from a little bit better.
Okay, now that sounds good. I'm not originally from South Dakota. Let me give you a little bit of my background. I was grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so I'm from a much larger metro areas where I'm from. I got into this. First of all, I when I was studying in college, I wasn't sure exactly what to do, and the guidance that I got was to get into city management, into public
Yeah.
administration. So I got my bachelor's degree from Baylor in public administration. Went on to get a master's in public administration from the University of North Texas, which that particular school is one of those in the country that really specializes in local government, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to do work at the local government level where you can, hear people as they're hear if things are working or hear if they're not working. So that's what I kind of got into. My first job out of college was in Alliance, Nebraska. That's in the center of the Panhandle, just south of South Dakota. And
Mm-hmm.
so there I got kind of three whole new windows of opportunity opened up for me in Alliance. One of them was I met my wife, and that was the greatest
That's a
window of
big one.
opportunity. So
There you go.
met my
I'll
wife.
make sure to get a clip of that and send it to her way.
Yeah, that sounds good. The other thing I did is I was working for a city manager who assigned me a lot of different things to do. I was in charge of risk management. I was in charge of purchasing. I was budget officer, and I was also assigned to be the airport manager. That got me into the airport work. And so that's kind of opened up that opportunity. And then the other thing, the last thing was I learned about the Black Hills because I was living in Alliance, moved there in January of back in '89, and made my first trip up to the Black Hills, I think sometime in February. And it was just
Yeah.
amazing. It's just amazing to see that this was here and all the beauty it has to offer. And then my wife had her family has had places here in the Black Hills too, so we got
Oh,
to.
very good.
That's how we ended up here eventually. But that's a little bit of my initial background.
I love it. I kind of want to get into you and me before we recorded. You were joking, saying that as far as you know, there's no degree out there to get into aviation planning. So I kind of want to hear, being the city manager and learning those roles, what kind of drew you to the aviation part of it besides having to do it being in a smaller town?
Well, I got into the aviation side because I liked the airport work that I was doing. And so when I left Alliance, I took a job as the airport manager in North Platte, Nebraska, and it was just solely doing airport work. I told my city
Okay.
manager one time, I'm going into the airport side of things because I think it seems like the fishbowl's a little cloudier over there. And that's how I got into airport work. It is a little cloudier, but you have a defined area of of tenants that you work with typically, but you're also serving the overall community. So I worked in North Platte, got the opportunity there. Was did get an opportunity after that to serve on the governor's cabinet in Nebraska, and I was the aeronautics director for Nebraska. Then went on to Fort Smith, Arkansas. I was the airport director in Fort Smith, and then went to the city of Fort Worth, Texas. So back down in the Dallas-Fort Worth
Yeah.
area, and I was the airport systems director for the city of Fort Worth. So I oversaw three airports there: Alliance, Meacham, and Spinks airports, which were all general aviation cargo type of facilities.
Okay.
And so that was about 25 years of my career was doing that. And then after I left the city of Fort Worth, really had always liked planning, always liked what it takes to kind of work through airport planning. And so connected up with a friend of mine who was here, who I'd known before. He was the airport director in Rapid City for many years at the same time I was in Fort Smith. So we knew each other. He connected me up with KLJ, which is the company I'm with now, and brought me on board, and I got into the airport planning side full time.
Amazing. Well, obviously, like you said, you've been around the block and been doing it a long time. Is there some key like points in history that, the airport planning really changed up for you?
You know, I think I had the opportunity to do airport planning work as the customer, in North Platte. Also doing it from a state level with the state system plan in Nebraska. Also doing it in doing planning work in Fort Smith. That we did an airport master plan there, and then I did a thing that I thought was kind of special. We've actually used it more in other airports. We did a thing called zone planning in Fort Worth. And so we did it at both Meacham and Spinks airports. And what we did in zone planning was instead of doing the entire airport, we basically zoomed in on a specific area of the airport that had some issues we were trying to resolve and did that. So those are the kind of exposures I had in planning from the airport side of things before I got into it full time. And but they were good opportunities. And for the most part, it's really trying to figure out, okay, what do we let's look at this a little bit more blank sheet level of try to fix things because I want to try to fix things for the long term. I don't want just a simple fix because there are often times that you can have simple fixes and the FAA does a very good job of giving you very good guidance and holding your feet to the fire when it comes to your runway and taxiway system. When you step back from that and you get into what we look at as apron areas and hangars and how the buildings are laid out and stuff like that,
Uh,
things can get really chaotic. And the FAA doesn't really weigh in on that stuff. So those things
there's a lot up
happen.
to
And
interpretation and
yeah, and the problem is that what may seem like a good solution can really cause you real significant problems for decades to come. Where a particular building gets placed, all of a sudden starts to really lay that out and starts to trigger it. People see that in a community. You could see if a street got laid out wrong or a house got built wrong or building got put in the wrong way. People see that, but they don't see it necessarily on airports because people don't really envision or have to deal with it as much, I guess.
absolutely. And especially, you're talking, think, people here in airports, they're thinking of for traveling purposes and people
Mhm.
transporting, right? But you're working a lot more with the cargo and the storage and stuff like that. Could you just break down for the average person kind of the different specialties that side has?
Yeah, in general, it's categorized into a couple of different categories from an overall standpoint. So you've got your scheduled passenger service is one component of service that an airport may have. You also have military activity that may be occurring, so that occurs on some airports, and I've had experience with that with some of the airports that I've worked with. You also have cargo activity, which is a scheduled operation, but it's specific to the cargo. And then the rest of it is all general aviation. And so the rest of it is just everything else, which can be business related, it can be recreational related, it can be a wide range of how people are using it. A lot of times people see with smaller airports, you'll see medical flights that are in and out, and those can be medical flights can be emergency flights, but they can also be all the movement of specialized personnel. Because the one thing interesting is that aviation basically delivers time, and I think that's important to realize. Well, that time is things like I need this cargo by this time. Used to be when they would do check processing. I need these checks processed by this time.
Hmm.
There's an airport we're working with. They've got that regularly. medical radioactive materials are delivered, and they're time sensitive. Well, guess what delivers time? Aviation, and so that's why you've got these flights that run around and deliver these materials so that hospitals can have it, so they can actually do the correct diagnosis that they need to do. So it's not always just an emergency situation. Sometimes it's just routine. I've got to get these specialty people into this community for them to do it. And there are people that use aviation that way. I mean, we had I remember it was in North Platte. There was a maintenance company that did elevator maintenance. Okay,
Okay.
well, those are specialized technicians. They kept a old station wagon at the airport in our parking lot all the time because they could fly in. They'd fly in about once a month. They'd come in and they'd go around and servicing all the elevators around the area that they needed to, and then fly back out. Well, what that
That's
does
very
is
neat.
there's a that as a company, they can have those specialists based in Kansas City or something like that, and then they can fly them out. That mechanic can basically be able to have a full life at home and not have had to spend 2 days on the road to go get to the place. They leave home in the morning, go do their trip, and they're home by the evening. And that kind
Yeah,
of thing
there's that
happens all the
time
time.
component for
Yeah.
sure.
So those are kind of some examples that come to mind of things that I've seen.
That kind of leads me into what role do you see regional airports really playing in economic development? I think that was a fantastic example there. Is there some other economic developments that you
Well,
see?
they certainly, I mean, airports, all airports to some extent are kind of an economic engine because they are delivering that piece. I remember when some of the when you had the internet starting to come around and start to deliver, it was delivering information in a in on an as needed basis. Right as soon as you needed the information, you could get it. Well, the
Hmm.
only thing that would deliver the products or the people was still aviation. That's the only thing that would do it. And so they were kind of coupled in a sense, the way I see it. And so that connectivity is really important, and it's really important for any community to perform economically. Is they do have to have that aviation connection. Sometimes it's through a small general aviation airport that's right there. Sometimes it's through another airport that's nearby. Each of the airports of different sizes play different roles, but they all to some extent do play into the economy, the local economy, in one way or the other. Whether it's people or whether it's products or things like that that may be going in and out. That's a generalization, but that maybe gives you
Yeah,
a little bit idea.
absolutely. When you're helping communities map out long-term infrastructure and strategy, how do you balance the long-term vision with the reality of, there's budgets involved, politics, and some places have limited resources.
Well, we as as a planner, I'm not as good at doing that. I try to, and so I admit it,
That's all
I
right.
am I will provide more information about maybe what you could do,
Okay.
which may require some very hard choices. Um, and what we do is we put that kind of stuff on paper. We call it alternatives analysis. Okay. And so we'll go all through an alternatives analysis of how things are laid out, what will it take to do certain things. And when we do that, we help people see this is what could occur. And sometimes those result in, okay, yeah, that's the right direction for us to go. We actually need to take some proactive steps to do that. It's still up to the local community to try to balance that and try to decide what do we think is the most important, what do we need to prioritize? And so that's a challenge, but it's one of those that we recognize as planners. That is the responsibility of the airport owner or the airport sponsor, the way it's called. And
Uh-huh.
um, and we just try to provide them the best information possible about what those alternatives look like so that they can make the most informed decision possible.
Gotcha. Kind of looking into the future here, obviously technology and transportation are always evolving. What changes do you think will most impact airports coming up here in the next decade?
You know, I think it's going to stop kind of still be the same old same old. I mean, I don't I there are things that are there's uh, autonomous vehicle operations and things like that are spoken about what could happen with that. That may play in somewhat, but it's still going to be about trying to figure out what point somebody needs to leave from and what point they need to get to, and how those places are going to work. Are those places capable of handling that kind of movement in and out? Because you can't just even I do some heliport planning. Um, and you may think, okay, it's just this little helipad. No, it's not. You got to figure out an approach surface to that thing. You've got to figure a departure surface to it. You've got to figure protection zones around it. So you can't just plop something like in that because, in that case, a helicopter is it's a rotary wing. So that
Yep.
means the wing is rotating. So it still needs for it to perform economically, it needs to be moving forward. It can't, it for it to hover, which a helicopter can hover, it's not the most efficient way for it to. I mean, it'll burn a lot of fuel just hovering. It needs to be moving that rotary wing in through the air to be able to do it, which means its approaches and departures are on a slope. They're not just a straight up, straight down. And that's the case, that's the same case with other types of vehicles. So you have to just realize it's a matter of physics. That's just kind of how things work. And so I think those kind of things are going to come into play when it comes to, autonomous operations and drone operations and things like that. They may be able to be used to some extent, but maybe not as much as people think they will be because of, safety considerations as well as noise considerations
Yeah, no kidding.
for that sort of thing. So we may see the vehicles change a little bit. We may see electrical use. So
Hmm.
there may be electric propulsion, electric, power being used for some transports. I think technology probably still has to come along more for that to happen.
The
But
core of it's really staying the same. Just yeah, like you said, just a different engine basically.
yeah, and because it's batteries are heavy and they stay heavy.
Yes,
This I
they
remember
do.
hearing some of how they were they were looking at electric motorcycles and trying to figure out how to make electric motorcycles work. Well, electric motorcycles, I guess, for some reason couldn't work so well because you had the weight of the battery, but you weren't able to make the vehicle more aerodynamic because you had a person sitting up there. So the
Yeah,
person
yeah.
is just this like huge parachute where they've made a lot of the electric vehicles are much more streamlined. They factor in the aerodynamics. So you just got to realize what can work and what can't work, and you make the use of it the way you can. So,
Very good. When you're looking at an airport that you've helped plan or improve, what are some signs that tell you that it's working?
well, the we like to see, businesses being able to flourish there. We like to see them being able to having a healthy group of tenants that are there, healthy operators. Those are some really good things to have in place. We like to see from an infrastructure standpoint, we like to see the compatible land use around those airports
Uh-huh.
so that airport can function to its full capability. And that's one of the things we jump into right at the first. We start with wind analysis to figure out what the winds are doing. That includes that weather analysis also includes instrument conditions. So we determine, okay, when are the instrument conditions occurring? What runways are they favoring to do that? Where can we make improvements? Because we're always trying to make sure to remove impediments to somebody
Yeah.
being able to get in and out of that airport. Because those impediments, which can be, like, say, for instance, in runway length, if the runway is way too short, well, that's an impediment to that operator because they're having to go out in and out with reduced fuel loads, reduce load period, and
Hmm.
you want them to be able to operate to the best extent possible. So we look at all those kind of factors to help make it work. We look at obstructions to make sure we don't have obstructions that are causing issues because you want to come in the lowest minimums possible. And then we look at once you get beyond like the runway and taxiway system, you get over to the hangars and things like that. You want to make sure people are maintaining things well, and the a lot of it is making sure the airport sponsor has good control of what's going on in their airport. They need that control, but they need there's a partnership of the sponsor having good control as well as the operators there being able to have the ability to succeed. And it's a balance, but it's a balance really of a public asset. And that's what's oftentimes not realized is that these are public assets that are there, and they have a while you may see a huge amount of space at an airport, when you really narrow it down to the area that's actually really developable for hangars and operations and things like that, it's a very finite space. It's so I think we looked at it one time, we were looking at one particular airport and we said, you know what? The amount of space, even though you've got, 300 acres here, the amount of space is equivalent to two city blocks. That's it.
That's
That's all
that's
you've got that's
crazy.
actually developable. So you really have to be very deliberate about how am I letting that two blocks being developed. If
Yeah,
a
you got
city was
some
limited to
decisions to
that
make
much,
there.
they'd be much more they'd be much more trying to control what was going on and how it was going to go on and making sure it would be an improvement that the whole community could benefit from versus just letting any operator go, yeah, just do what you want, you're fine. But yeah, okay, but you realize you only have this much space.
And when it's used, it's used.
Yeah, and once it's used up, and so that's some of what we encounter. I know I'm kind of rabbit trailing on this stuff, but hopefully it's helpful.
No, absolutely it is. It's a side of things that I don't think the public's really paying much attention to. And like you said, it's a public asset. So I'm glad we're able to that you're able to educate us on that, Kent. If people are looking to get more education and connect with you and learn more about this, where would you send them to?
Yeah, best way to connect with me is just through LinkedIn. So that'd be the easiest way to connect with me. So send me an invite to join or follow whatever it is that we call, and
Yep,
and you can message me if you have any questions or something like that. I'd be happy to help out people. Always trying to help out people with making the improvements that they need to with their airports and heliports or whatever else.
that's awesome. Well, Kent, I appreciate you breaking this down. Infrastructure isn't always flashy, but it shapes communities in a big way. So thanks for helping us understand it a little bit better here.
Good deal. And thanks for the opportunity, Levi.
Of course, sir. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you guys on the next one.